All right, welcome back. Now we're going to get into integral theory as a meta framework for sustainable design. I'm very excited about this. Some disclaimers. Integral theory is, in some people's minds, a very complicated and potentially powerful operating system for shaping and helping you to create multiple perspectives for how you might think or approach a problem. We're not going to get into really any of the depth of integral theory like I'd like to, because there's so much more to cover in this course, but hopefully the frameworks will be useful for you. And essentially, integral theory is broken up into 4 quadrants or perspectives that we can use to understand reality from these perspectives simultaneously. What I think is very powerful about this is it acknowledges that the subjective and the objective views as being equal and equally important in understanding how we understand reality. At the same time, we understand that reality through our own individual lens as a person with our own values and feelings, but also through lenses that have been created for us by culture. So we live in different cultures, different religions, and those shape the way we look at the world, right? So if we can begin to understand these 4 perspectives in a deeper way, we might have some effective sustainable design. So these shorthands are I, it, we, and its as the pronouns. We also use upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, which I'll get into in a minute. So the upper left quadrant in terms of integral theory is what you're used to thinking about from a design point of view where you're trying to maximize aesthetics. Here it's all about the experiences that an individual would have in space, time, or in a place. However, if we think about sustainable design, we're looking at performative design or high performance building design. We think about behaviors, facts, things that we can measure, things that are observable, things that are certainly very objectively understood. And then we have our cultural perspective here, which is looking at culture and worldview, which we spent a lot of time on. I think I've made the argument that a new worldview is emerging, and it is reshaping the way we think about reality. And finally, what's most common to sustainable design is a systems approach, really thinking about all of the systems, how they interact and engage each other, from ecological systems to technical systems. So that's the basics of it. Let's go through and see how that plays out. I like this diagram a lot because it gives you a nice definition of these 4 quadrants. Again, here we're looking at thoughts and emotions and memories. Here we're looking at the materiality of something, the measurable weight, something we can observe. Here we're looking at shared values, meanings, language, relationships, all of those things that we can't actually see and touch, but we certainly know that they exist because they shape our views. And finally, the systems and networks that also shape our reality and get us to understand our place in the world. So let's go a little bit deeper. This is from Barrett Brown. I like this one because he's tied integral theory into sustainability, and he looks at the 4 quadrants really as influences. So in the upper left, you see psychological, lower left, the cultural, the lower right, systems, and the upper right, using the term behavioral, which, by the way, I really hate that term. I think it's not a great indicator of what that quadrant's about. Technically, it's correct. I tend to use the terms facts and performance for that quadrant, but we'll move on. Now, there's 2 ways to use these quadrants. You can use it as an individual looking out into the world, and the key here is to simultaneously think and feel in 4 perspectives, not just one. And this is the strength of integral theories, allowing us to be holistic and allowing us to move towards integration. So our overall quality of reality is actually understood by understanding that reality through these 4 perspectives simultaneously. I will be giving more examples as we move forward. The other way that integral theory is used is to identify and try to solve a problem. So in this case, there's some dying fish in the lake, and in the upper left, we'll look at the psychological impacts of those fish, i.e. I feel sad. Over here, we look at the measurables. We can take experiments, we can take measurements, we can try to understand empirically why those fish are dying. We can look at the cultural phenomenon. Do we value nature? Do we not value nature? Typically, fish die in a lake when we've done something where we don't have a lot of value for nature. And finally, what were the systems that led to those fish dying? If we can think about all of those simultaneously when we come to a problem, it gives us what I think is a pretty good holistic understanding of that problem from all perspectives. Now, I'm just going to give you a couple more examples of how these quadrants work. This is just pure visual. I thought the graphics here were very nice, where you see the sort of the interior view here, and then the collection of interior views here. This is the materialistic view, and then the interconnection between those materialistic views. And in the center is this sense of integration. Quick example here. Many people, many companies are using integral theory to help shape and understand their own core values and their core behaviors. This is a group that was looking at the integral theory for use in thinking about medicine. And you see the 4 quadrants right there as alternative care, emotions, orthodox medicine, the things you would expect, all the systems underneath that, and finally the cultural values and the judgments that go with it. So if I think about this from 4 perspectives, I can actually have a lot of statistics, things that I can measure that tell me about human health in a particular situation. I can also think about the systems of how healthcare is delivered, whether you like it or not. It's a very complex system and actually will lead to or not lead to great care. But there's these weird cultural things that occur that actually you would say are irrational. For example, in this country, people are deciding not to vaccinate their kids. Now, I say irrational because I vaccinated my kids because that's my cultural values. Some people in this country are not doing that, and there's a great debate about what is the ethical imperative here that we should be following. And finally, we know that although some people may take medicine, that medicine might be a placebo, but psychologically they feel better, and we know that that actually helps healing. So that's looking at a very simple thing through the 4 perspectives. I'm going to be giving you lots more examples in the set of lectures as we move forward, but I just want to give you a sense of that. Now, how we use integral theory here in the Sustainable Design program is we think about physical reality, the who, what, and when. I think this is a much more basic way to understand these. So this quadrant is really about answering the basic, measurable, physical questions that might come up. So this is taxonomy, classification, measurement, chronology. Data points, to me, is my favorite one because it's information that actually has no real meaning or relevance to anything else. They're just pure facts. And then when you begin to put those facts into a system of interaction, you start to get a greater sense of how the whole thing functions as a system. And then there's the interpretive reality, the whole idea of how do we think about these, how do we perceive them, worldview, shared values, narratives, beliefs, stories. These certainly shape our understanding of these different physical environments that we live in. And finally, how does it look and feel? So here we're looking at the psychological response. And I use the big word phenomenology, which is how do you feel in space? And this is something that I think designers spend a lot of time in this quadrant, the upper left, and maybe some in the lower left. Sustainable design is really important because it begins to bring in these quadrants in a more meaningful way. So you might say that you might find engineers working over here and you might find designers working over here, which hence the ultimate duality between those 2 professions. But what's happening with sustainable design is if you are a sustainable designer, you are thinking about all 4 of these perspectives simultaneously in everything that you draw, everything that you conceive. And if you can do that, you're going to move towards something that's more intrinsically sustainable or something that's going to last for a much longer period of time. So just for a shorthand, and as we get to the end of this lecture, I always remember the term when I started architecture school that was form follows function. And it was all about expressing the functions or the systems of the building in its appearance. And that drove modern design, modernist design for quite a while. In sustainable design, unfortunately, we've gotten stuck with form follows performance, where all of our decisions are made solely from the idea of maximizing performance. We know intuitively and probably empirically that if we only follow performance, we're going to have not a sustainable project. But we talked about last week, if it's not beautiful, it's not sustainable. So there's nothing fundamentally unsustainable about aesthetically driven design as long as it's considered within these other perspectives. And finally, and I think the most important one, form follows worldview. And yes, I did coin that term. So if you use it, please put my name next to it. And right now we're looking at this sense of social responsibility in design. And here again, in sustainable design, all 4 of these need to be maximized and leveraged and multiplied with each other to create an ultimate reality that might be very favorable. Really, this is shockingly the end of this video. I'm going to actually, in the next video, give you lots of examples of how integral theory plays out. And eventually we're going to get into how integral theory leads to integral sustainable design. I hope, though, that you can see how this might be a good framework for thinking about design, especially building upon previous lectures where we did look at the quadruple bottom line. So I hope you'll come back and join me in the next video.